Chapter 35. Hard Stop. The elevator whined mechanically as it rattled upward. The overheads gave off an uneven bluish light that didn't quite fill the space. Jack made no effort to hide his trembling. He stood quietly next to Greenridge, watching the door like a greyhound watches a starting gate. As soon as it opened, he would run as fast as he could. What he wouldn't give to swap powers with Sprint right about now. He'd seen a ladder on their way to the elevator. It stretched the full 50 yards up the wall, looking like it had seen 1,000 years of corrosive winters. But he wasn't heavy. His arms were still taped behind his back, but the ladder was angled. Maybe he could lean against it. Risky, sure, but what choice was there? If he could take Greenridge by surprise, make it over the edge before the grizzly had time to react, well, that was as far as his plan got. Once on the ground, he'd still have to run a good mile of treeless snow at the mouth of the canyon. But even this faint hope was crushed the moment the doors opened. A fleet of 8 armed soldiers stood waiting for them. Greenridge shoved Jack roughly forward, and they stepped out onto the top of the wall. There wasn't much up here, only rusted railings along either side of a cement path stretching to the opposite mountain face. The path was wide enough to land an anazopter, and marked with potholes and oil stains throughout. Halfway across, a thick black stripe marked the point where the wall divided into 2 separate gates.
"Another one? Do we get to eat him this time?"
One of the guards sneered. He was a gray wolf with yellow eyes that matched his yellow teeth.
"Oh, he's not much to share,"
said another, this one a chubby black bear.
"We're not going to eat him,"
Greenridge said.
"This little guy's gonna open the gate for us. Isn't that right, Jack?"
Jack made no answer, not only because he didn't know what Greenridge meant, he was too afraid to speak, even if he'd wanted to do so. That's when the numbers came to him. 11-789-02. He didn't know what they meant, or why they came so easily, and there was something oddly familiar about them. They rolled around in his mind like a song he couldn't get out of his head. 11-789-02. 11-789-02. Greenridge shoved him once more. He nearly toppled over, and the group moved to the northern edge of the wall and looked down. The army 50 yards below them was bigger than Jack could have imagined, seeming to fill the canyon as far as he could see. They moved around like 100,000 ants, climbing over one another, onto the backs of tanks and other war machines.
"Some of the weaker ones have been sacrificed to the meager rations,"
the horned creature had said. The thought made Jack feel faint.
"My brothers!"
Greenridge roared.
"Today we take back what is ours. Today we reclaim the home from which our fathers were banished. Today the red teeth will rise!"
The crowd hadn't quieted during this speech, and they didn't seem to grow louder as it ended, but guns were raised over heads, and many let out triumphant roars.
"Thing of beauty, isn't it?"
Greenridge said, turning to Jack.
"The strongest of the strong down there. They don't need your superhero hyena. Hard work and belief, that's all they need. We live in a world where the weak are given the same rights as the strong, thanks to bleeding hearts like Aaron Harding and Margaret Claythorne. But is that how it's meant to be? Look at you, Jack, shaking like a whipped pup. Without the protection of stronger animals, you don't stand a chance. Can you honestly tell me that isn't how it's meant to be? Can you honestly say that we weren't designed this way, for the strong to rule the weak?"
He grabbed Jack by the jaw, squeezing his cheeks together.
"Look at those teeth,"
he said, showing Jack's face around to the others. They laughed.
"You were meant to eat grass, kid,"
he continued, throwing Jack's face back.
"But what about me? What are these for?"
He curled his lip and tapped a yellowish fang longer than Jack's finger. Then he laughed.
Look at me, justifying myself to you. I've been in this country too long.
Without another word, he stood to full height and shoved Jack once more. The group moved along the top of the wall until they arrived at a small metal keypad mounted into the railing, with silver buttons for 0 through 9, along with the pound and asterisk keys. It looked like an old phone, but in place of a receiver, there was a big red light.
I've tried this several times,
Greenridge said.
Every rabbit I've brought before now has failed, so I thought I'd combine their efforts.
He reached into the neck of his coat and withdrew a necklace of thick rope, with several large pendants dangling from it. They were the shape of large slugs, wrapped in glossy black tape. In several places, white fur protruded from between the tape. Rabbit feet.
It's not going to start any fashion trends,
Greenridge continued.
But it's more than paid off. I survived that river barely scathed. You rabbits. Well, it's a wonder you don't rule the world. Proves my point, doesn't it?
As Greenridge spoke, Jack looked up at the canyon walls. Sun bounced off blinding white sheets of snow. If only Maddie was here, he thought.
But after watching you survive again and again and again,
Greenridge was saying,
I'm certain you are the one I've been waiting for. See, I can't just sit here punching numbers. There are 2 codes. I'm just as likely to enter the code for self-destruct as the one for open. Only Claythorne knew them both. If I'd tried to force her to open the gates, she could enter the self-destruct code instead. Self-righteous fleabag.
He gripped Jack roughly around the back of the neck, shut his eyes, and tapped out several keys on the pad. The response was immediate. The red light blinked to life. The ground beneath Jack's feet rumbled steadily as it began to shift sideways, accompanied by a long, low moan. Jack looked toward the opposite half of the gate. The 2 sections were turning a slight angle from each other, the concrete road forming a V that angled further and further outward, away from the army below, until finally splitting into 2 enormous doors.
Yes!
Greenridge roared, nearly knocking Jack to the ground as he released him. He walked to the edge once more, joined by his guards, and leaned over the railing, balled fists raised to the sky. One of the guards withdrew a pistol from his belt and fired it into the air, but Greenridge caught him around the wrist.
Are you crazy?
He roared, pointing to the canyon walls.
You want to bring the whole thing down on us?
Do it now, a voice seemed to say. It was so clear it took Jack by surprise, and he looked around. There was no one else. Greenridge and his guards all stood at the railing with their backs to him. He didn't hear the voice again, but his stomach tightened, and he understood. Claythorne had a secret code, one that would cause the canyon to self-destruct. If Greenridge could use Jack to enter the correct code, surely Jack himself could enter the alternate. By the time Greenridge had realized his mistake in letting him go, Jack was already at the keypad. His bound wrists shifted around his right hip.
Hey, wait!
The bear yelled, charging toward him. 11-789-02. As abruptly as they had started opening, the gates came to a grinding halt, stopping at a shallow angle from each other. The ground, the mountain, everything began to shake so violently Jack had to grip the keypad to keep from falling, and watched in numb terror as several guards toppled over the railing and into the canyon. The canyon walls began to growl. Boulders from the lower section tumbled down the face, then clumps of snow. Then the large sheets along the mountain's upper crest tore away and began to slide.
What have you done?
The bear roared. He grabbed Jack around the throat and hoisted him into the air.
I'll kill you for this!
Panic flooded Jack's senses as the bear's grip on his throat tightened. He couldn't breathe. His head began to feel light. And then, Over Greenridge's shoulder, someone was smiling at him. At first, the face was shaded, and Jack recognized it as the farmer with the blue tractor. Only his hat was missing, and instead a mane of tangled dreadlocks dangled around his shoulders. King of Heart's expression was soft and warm. He opened his mouth, and a voice rose from inside him as though he were a radio. A voice Jack knew immediately as that of Dr. Walraven.
I know you won't understand this now, but sometimes you have to lose in order to win.
And just like that, King was gone. Blinking, gasping for air, Jack kicked and fought and struggled. He caught Greenridge in the chest, although the bear hardly seemed to notice. He kicked again. His windpipe felt as though it had collapsed. He kicked again. This time, his foot caught on something, and he jerked his leg upward. The rabbit feet. The necklace came up over Greenridge's head, flew over the railing, and fell into the gorge. The effect this had on Greenridge was terrifying. He roared furiously, swung Jack around, and dangled him over the empty air. He was leaning far out, his waist bent around the railing.
Any last words, kid?
He yelled over the roar of the avalanche below them.
Sometimes you have to lose in order to win.
And then Jack understood. It was the choice King had made for everyone on that train, the choice Dr. Walraven had made for Jack. And now it was Jack's turn. He gripped Greenridge's massive paw with both of his own, swung his feet upward to connect with the railing, and pushed. Fear flashed into Greenridge's eyes as he toppled over the bar, and the two of them fell toward the cascading avalanche below. They split apart in the air, Jack pinwheeling until he faced the sky. He felt as if he would fall forever, watching the half-opened gates stretch upward before him. A sort of peace flooded him like warm fluid. Sometimes you have to lose in order to win. He had chosen to lose, so that others could win, so that good could win. He clenched his teeth and braced for impact. There was a flash of light. The gray clouds were broken by a white-hot missile, arcing over the gate and plummeting down, straight toward him. He could just make out the brilliant white figure, crackling like a holiday sparkler, and then he was swallowed by the avalanche.